Hey guys, what's going on today? BOJoeKO here, and welcome to our NHL 16 Wishlist series. And this time around, I'm actually going to be doing it collaboratively. Is that the right word? Sure, let's go with that. With my good old buddy, old pal, Canada's 99-cent salad bar, Richard Head 93.
Hey Joe, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity of you.
Go ahead.
Let's do this.
All right, so as you guys know, I did my personal wish list last year. Richard wanted to join in on this experience as well. So basically, we're just going to be doing periodic videos, hopefully throughout the next couple of weeks or months, however long it's going to take us to run down every major game mode that has been featured in NHL 15 and talk about the likes, dislikes, and things that we want to see improved for the next edition of the game. So as we know, NHL 16 will probably be only available for next-gen consoles this coming year. So first off, the first mode that we are going to talk about is GM mode. So since GM mode was featured as basically NHL 14 GM mode for Xbox 360 and PS3. We're going to talk about those modes slightly, but our main focus is going to be on the next generation GM mode that was featured in NHL 15 for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. So let's get started with this, and like I did last year, what we're going to be doing is obviously we're going to talk about our likes and our dislikes for the improvements that were made onto this versions of the game, and then talk about the kind of things that we would like to see for the next edition of the game. So first off, let's start with the things that we liked about the GM mode for this year, and first off, I want to start specifically with the scouting. Now, I think the scouting definitely took a much better approach this year. Once again, it looks nicer. I'll definitely talk about that when we do the overall presentation later. But the fact that you get a cool little map that comes up and you could actually select the region that you wanted to go to. It's the same as last time, but it just looks prettier. But I really like the fact that you could add players to a certain watch list this year. And especially with the new drafting update that came in later, I think that was a really cool addition. So that way you can actually have a very good field of view on the players that you were specifically looking at for scouting, and could do that during the draft. Any thought on that, Richard? What you thought of the scouting this year?
Oh yeah, that was the one thing I was going to touch on, is that I liked how they put the watch list in, so that when you're looking at a certain area, so say for instance the WHL, you weren't looking at everyone. You were looking at those that you actually wanted to know information about. So I really liked that as well. So good point to bring up.
Mm-hmm. And definitely just pointing in on those certain players, so you'll definitely you get a better look of what their actual potentials are going to be. Still, if you don't decide to scout a certain area, you're going to have unknown potentials, but the more and more you scout certain players or have them pinned on your watch list, you get a much better exact amount of what their player potentials was going to be. So next up on the list here, I have a certain aspect that I have, which is kind of like a double-edged sword. It's a good thing. It can be a good thing, and it can be a bad thing as well. So first off, I'll start with the thing that I liked about it is there was no AHL team in the next generation for GM mode. And now the only reason I think that was a good thing to leave that out is it's much easier for new players that are joining the game to be introduced to GM mode, because all they really have to worry about is the NHL team. They don't have to worry about worrying about where their players are playing in the AHL, whether they're not getting enough ice time or not. It's just either they're playing in the NHL or they're in the system somewhere, either on the AHL team or the juniors. That way, if they don't want to play in the NHL, you send them down to the AHL and the game automatically takes care of it for you. So...
Yeah. So, I was going to get at that. Actually, I'll wait until you talk about the cons of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the things, I talked about this last year, and I feel this is a good thing that they improved on it as well, is the stat information this year. They finally put in a lot more extended years rather than just leaving it for, I don't know, the first four, only limiting it to 4 years, depending on how long your GM mode was. This time they put the entire stat information for the entire player for their entire career. So it goes all the way back to when they first started their NHL career, and they include that on the game, which I think was a really good touch.
I think another cool thing to kind of add, I mean, I agree with you. It's excellent to have, but it'd be cool if they also had all like a little sidebar, something for all-time stats, or kind of like how you can go to NHL.com and look at career stats for everyone, but have that just updated to however many points you have. So say you're in 2022, it's all kind of caught up there. I think that'd be pretty cool as well.
Just like a running total of everything, goals, assists, all that kind of stuff. Like I said, I just mentioned it briefly last time. Just the overall presentation. I mean, it looks nice. The entire game looks nice, to just say that. Whether it's the menus, whether it's the gameplay, it just looks cool. The menus are still, I think it could use a little bit of an improvement to update how long it takes to go from menu to menu. Sometimes it could get a little bit confusing at some times, but overall, the presentation of it is very good looking.
Yeah, that was. I was actually going to say that I didn't like the presentation at the beginning. I kind of had to get used to that, but I imagine that's how I was with every other game as well. Like, I'm sure I didn't like how the NHL 13 or 14 GM modes were set up, but yeah, this one you kind of take a little while to grow on you.
And then finally on our likes wished wasn't initially implemented in the GM mode, but it came with an update in. Oh man, when did that update come out? It came out in, I want to say, December, January. They came out with the update for the drafting system in GM mode, and I absolutely love the new drafting update in GM mode. It's really cool.
The thing is that it reminds me too much of GM Connected, and then I get all upset because it's not in the game. Because with that whole like timer and everything, it's perfect. Like, I kind of like how there is a timer, like to kind of put a little bit of pressure on you. But it kind of doesn't make sense when you got the timer on you, but then as soon as you go looking for someone, the timer stops again.
Yeah, it's kind of. It does have its flaws. I think it's a very good. It's a cool system that they implemented. I definitely think it could be upgraded, and like you said, I think it's a good, if they do want to implement GM mode connected in the near future, whether it's next year or the following year, I think that's a good stepping stone for what they could do to actually make that mode more interactive as such, rather than just just going in there, selecting players and whatnot, first come first serve basis. I think that's cool if they would do that there.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we go on to the dislikes for this mode, when there actually are a good bit of dislikes, because as much as we can, talk about the good things that are about this mode, it is still a very incomplete game mode. And they came out and said that, or Rammer or one of their mods did say that it was not a complete mode, because their focus was more on HUT. We'll get to that later when we do our HUT wish list and stuff like that. But the dislikes, one of the main things for me is the lack of the in-game simulation, not being able to simulate period by period by period, and then looking at all the stats after the game, especially when it comes to, for the people who make the series is on YouTube. It just makes the playoffs extremely boring. That way you can't see who's scoring in such or such game. You can't tell who's having a good playoff run or a bad playoff run. You just have to simulate through the calendar. It's just a pretty boring aspect. It took a lot of entertainment out of it, I think.
Absolutely, I agree.
The trading system. The trading system is, I hate to say it, it's almost damn near impossible when you set it on the hardest difficulty. Right now, I'm playing my GM mode series on medium trade difficulty, and I still think it's pretty hard. The trading system was very bad this year. Especially because it's just the way they have it set up, where, I mean, the trade bars are still good if you just ignore everything about, when you put players up on for a trade, and if you just ignore the bars at the bottom, you could still make the trades just on your own intuition of, oh, this guy's bar is about here, maybe this trade will go through. But I just hate the way it was set up, so that way when you put a certain player up on this side of the trade screen, you put another player up from an opposing team, the blue bars on the bottom go back and forth, up and down. not even really sure why they're going up or going down. It's just a very weird setup that I think they definitely could have improved on. I didn't like it this year.
Yeah, I was surprised that. I mean, I know you're not the only one to have that problem. It's just whenever I played GM mode, I guess I never made that many trades to really notice that, or maybe I was just giving up way too much for way too little.
Mm-hmm. I'm not the one that makes a lot of trades in GM mode anyway. I'm the kind of person that likes to see the prospects develop and such. But when you have to make a trade, you have to make a trade, and I didn't like the system at all. No AHL team or stats. This is the other side of that double-edged sword. I didn't like that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of bringing back to what you said about how it would make sense for them to take it out if for like beginners or something like that. But I would at least like want maybe to see like how many points, or even have like the scoring leaders and like all the trophies and stuff like they had last year. Like at least see how people are doing down there. It's not like just send them and then, oh, okay, well, I guess he is now a 79 instead of a 77 or something like that.
Mm-hmm, yeah, like, there's just no stats. You can't specifically point in where you want this person to play. Like, oh, how do I know if this person's playing on the first line in the AHL or not, like the second or the third line or anything like that? It's just a random guess. You have to assume that all players down there are getting equal playing time, which I don't believe that for a second. It's just weird. No, like I said, no editing of lines. You can't track your AHL team through the season. There's no stats to follow. It's just you can only focus on one thing and one thing only, and that's the NHL team. You know,
sorry.
It just, like I said, it makes it less interactive.
Yeah, like ideally in my mind, it would almost make sense, like if it was that much of a like learning curve for new people and those who are experienced with the game, to add or take out AHL, to maybe have like a slider at the beginning of the GM mode saying whether or not you want to deal with the AHL or just leave it as is.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things I have later on the wish list where you can turn certain things on and off.
Yeah.
Moving on now, potentials. I did not
like it.
I did not like it. They changed the potential system this year, if you guys did not know. Going from NHL 14, they had the star potential, which I liked, whether they were green, yellow, or red stars, and a scale of 1 to 5 stars, determining on if the player was going to be successful as a professional player or not. This year, in the new next gen, they took that out. They replaced the stars. This year, they grouped it by the same color, red, yellow, and green, but this year they marked it as a low, medium, or high potential. High being green, medium being yellow, and low being red. It's just kind of weird because you don't know. You really don't know. Which the one thing I hated about this thing this year is, I personally had this in just the last episode of my GM mode. You could have players in your minor league system that have a potential as, like, say they're 22 years old, they have low red potential as like a top 4 AHL player. But then once their overall increases as it gets closer to 80, because that's when you start to see that potential sort of change, it changes from, top 6 AHL forward to bottom 6 forward in an NHL team. It's just weird. The way they did the potential this year is really hard to follow, because it's really dependent on age again this year, which is kind of stupid if you ask me, because once his age is still so low but his potential is pretty crappy, you're not going to think twice. You're just going to release that player right away. But then if you wait an extra year, his potential will change to something that could be serviceable on your NHL team. I don't like the way they use the potential system this year at all. I really hope that they go back to the stars.
Yeah, I kind of have like mixed feelings about that. I did like that how they have what their potential can be and what their potential is right now. So, like, okay, well, he's a bottom 6 AHL forward right now, but he has a potential. Like, I like that kind of thing, but I agree with you where, I mean, it's cool that it fluctuates, because it makes no sense that someone highly touted is guaranteed to be a great NHL player in the future. It just, I feel like it fluctuates a little bit too much almost. And without warning, really.
Yeah.
Like if they had the AHL, for instance, and you were playing him lots, then it would make sense if it changes for the good or for the bad.
That's what it says. It's completely random. It's because if there, like you said, if there was an AHL team, then you could actually have a physical effect on how the thing turns out. But since there's no AHL team, it's basically completely random on how it turns out. And one more final thing here is the goalie rotation I have. Just again, it has the same problem last year where if you have the automated rotate goalies on, there will be that odd instance where the backup, who's significantly lower overall than your starter, will get more starts than the starting goaltender does, and I still need to work out the kinks with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is there anything else you wanted to add for the dislikes, or?
No, I'm ready.
All right, so let's dive in to our things, the wish list part of the video, actually, and let's talk about the stuff that we would like to see added for this wish list. So I think the best way to do this, we'll just go back and forth between each adding a topic, and then we'll just talk about it. So I'll start with it first, and the one thing I would like to see, I have like 3 things in here. Actually, I'll talk about one thing first. Well, I have 3 things here. Yeah, I'll talk about this first. Sorry. So, going along with the scouting thing, something that I would like to see next year concerning scouting and the drafting prospects is I would like to see the stats for drafting prospects. You can just like when you scout them, all it tells you is, oh yeah, this player is going to be like a franchise NHL player or a top 6 or a top 6, whatever, top 3, top 5 pick in the draft. Okay, but where is the stats to back that up?
Yeah. See, I had that too. It would be really awesome to see like whether they played in the CHL, college, or somewhere across the seas. It'd be really awesome to see their stats, and even after you drafted them. So you draft a player who's 18 years old, but he's not ready for NHL, so next year he's going to be playing in the CHL. It'd still be really nice to see how many points he got in the CHL or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had that too.
Because like I said, it's like maybe you don't want to go after, especially for later round picks, I would assume that. Because sometimes, especially in GM mode, I think having a good hockey IQ helps you out a lot because you follow the real life NHL, so that you actually know certain players that could turn out pretty good in the game as well. But if they had the stats in there, especially for later rounds, be like, oh, this guy wasn't on the board, but he scored 40-something goals last season for his specific team. Maybe I'll pick this guy up. Maybe he'll be a pretty good goal scorer if he ever does make it to the NHL one day or something like that. It just makes it more interactive, I guess, when you're picking players for your team come draft day.
Yeah. I did like, however, this year when after we were just kind of bashing this whole thing, how when you can draft someone from the later rounds and they could potentially be a steal or a dark horse, really, because they're, like we mentioned before, they're potential switches.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to get how I like that about this game, where as of last year in 14, everyone knew to pick up Julius Honka in the 3rd round because he was a steal or something like that. I like how it kind of changes, and it's a little bit randomized now, but like we mentioned before, there's a lot of I guess cons to that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, you're up. Let's talk about one of your suggestions.
Yeah, still on the topic of scouting and drafting.
Whatever, you can change
okay.
up.
Well, yeah, just I'm more of a fan of the little things in the game, like that's what really makes the game for me. So I might be one of like maybe 10 people in the world who want this, but I feel like it would be really cool when doing the draft to kind of have like so this year's draft was in Philly, right?
This past drafts, yes, was in Philly.
Okay, yeah. It would be so cool if there was maybe a little transition. All of a sudden we were at the draft combine or whatever it's called in X city, so Philadelphia, and maybe for the first round or something, it's all kind of animated, like not over exaggerated where it's like watching a movie, but kind of have like Bettman walk up and then, Anaheim's pick is up. So the Anaheim GM and their coaching staff go up, pick a player. And I think that would be kind of cool, like having that little simulation go through.
I think they could probably put that in there, to be honest, because I mean, if they have the NBC rights and stuff like that for Hut when they do like the pregame like highlight package of just a random like nature thing like that. I definitely think they could put something in there, because even in the Be a Pro, when you saw that when you pick your first Be a Pro character, there was kind of just like even if it just has like a background behind it, just like a preset picture or something like that. I know in Be a Pro they did that when you select your team and the random like thing comes up for when you're going to get selected 1 through 30. It has the kind of picture in the background of I guess what the drafting floor would look like, just like all the tables set up and like the side thing of arena. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. So wish list here. I have improved the potential system, but we kind of already talked about that. Like I said, I think it'd be better if they just went back to the green, yellow star potential, just change it up a little bit. I think that'd be good. This one, I want to really wreck on EA for this. As much as I like their game, this is something that definitely needs to be seriously fixed. Improve the CPU GM intelligence. Now, I'll give them this. Maybe it not be in GM mode sometimes, but sometimes the GM to GM, computer GM to GM, they do make good trades. I'll give them that. There are certain times where the computer GMs will make very good trades with each other, sending off, like an older player for a young prospect or something like that for a playoff team run or whatever. But then there are those certain instances where come free agency time, you'll find an elite goaltender prospect or an elite player prospect that magically makes his way into free agency. You'll look when he was drafted, say 5th overall by the Buffalo Sabres. Why is this guy in free agency only 1 or 2 years after he was drafted? It should not make any sense. There should be no reason for a guy who was drafted top 5 overall in the entire league why he should end up in free agency 2 years down the line. They just need to have a better CPU intelligence of holding on to those very key valuable prospects. Like, we shouldn't be going into free agency every year or so or every other year and finding like this elite potential 21 or 22-year-old or a 20-year-old really good potential player.
No, I don't know. I haven't seen that personally. I mean,
I see it.
Obviously,
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Last year's game especially.
I mean, the only time I really saw that was last year's game when it seemed like in the second or third year, Taves would always be
Taves or Kane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, that might be. I don't know. It could be plausible sometimes because, they both want a lot of money. But if it's a smart GM, you wouldn't want potentially 2 top 10 players in the NHL walking off your team like that. There was no way that would happen in real life NHL, I would think. But I digress. Whether it's like a top 10 player in the NHL or a really valuable prospect, I think improving the GM CPU intelligence would be a really great improvement to the game, limiting the amount of really good players that you can find in free agency.
I don't know. It seems like kind of like how you mentioned how it's difficult to trade with them, but like some parts they're like, okay, awesome. They're strong in terms of knowledge on this part, but dumb when it comes to this kind of part. So,
yeah, I think they're smart GM to CPU, but then when you get the user into play there, it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
All right, you're up.
Just kind of, you briefly mentioned, trading between things. So another thing I would like, bringing up the little things again, is in NBA, whenever a GM wants to make a trade with you, they're like, you'll get a little ring, your phone's going off animation, and the GM's face pops up, and he's like, hey, it's so-and-so from the Calgary Flames. I would like to make a trade with you. And it's almost like a conversation more than just a table where you could pick which players to put in. I think that would be kind of cool. I mean, obviously you can't choose what you'd say to them, but at least kind of have that realism effect to it. So he's offering this, I counter with this. Oh, okay, a little brief conversation, words. I'm actually looking for this kind of thing. I think that would be pretty cool in terms of adding to trading for sure.
Interesting.
And then I'm also we briefly kind of mentioned this. I don't know if you had a lot more to talk about than I did, but adding. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about this later. Continue, please.
Okay, going off of trading, I said adding in a better trading system definitely would be good. And what else? Adding the AHL team. I'm just going to go over the stuff that we already talked about and just adding it back in. So a better trading system, I think that'd be good. Adding the AHL team back into it. If NHL somehow magically gets the rights to like college hockey or like you said ECHL, I think that'd be cool if they could get that in there as well. All right, let's move on to contracts now.
Yeah,
contracts I think are a very good. They could do a lot with contracts, so we're just going to throw out all the stuff that we have with contracts here. I mentioned this last year, and they still didn't put it in this year, so we're going to hope for it next year. Contract extensions throughout the season. Like I said, it's more often you see players getting contract extensions or getting re-signed to deals more often midway through the season than you do at the end of the year nowadays. So more than likely, the only players that you see getting like signed at the end of the year or during the off season are your restricted free agents, moreover than your unrestricted free agents. There is the certain time when the unrestricted free agents obviously get signed at the end of the year, but more often than not, you're seeing more and more players getting re-signed and extensions midway through the year or as the year's coming to the end. So I think that'd be cool if they can add contract extensions mid-seasons. No trade clauses. I think this would be really cool if they added in there. Shout out to somebody on Twitter. I'll grab his name up there, as you can probably talk about the no trade clauses here. I want to make sure I get his name right.
So, for instance, say I'm trading with Joe. I'm trading with a different team, and I want this certain player, but I noticed that there's a little star beside his name, which means that when he signed the contract, we'll kind of get into this a little bit later, but his contract had the no trade clause. So I can still offer a trade for him, and who knows, maybe I'll be happy with the trade. The GM will even accept the trade. But in a couple days, we find out the trade actually can't go through because the player who had the no trade clause doesn't actually want to come to your team. So I believe in 14 they had, I don't remember if they had it in this game, but there's the team interest bar. So certain players could be attracted to certain teams based on how they did or where they are. I don't even know how it really works, really. But say I want a certain player, the trade looks perfect, but that player doesn't want to come to my team. The player could say, no, I don't want to go there. And then the trade, even though it was accepted by the GM, is botched. Did I kind of touch up on the right stuff there? Or?
Kind of the aspect, of like say no trade clauses. You would have to, I think it would be cool if they had more GM to player interaction with that certain player, even if it's just like you have to do certain things like in order to influence the player so that he can waive his no trade clause to go to or any team, or maybe he has certain teams that he would waive his no trade clause to go to the certain team. But yeah, you kind of basically touched on it. Whether they'd want to come to the team or they don't want to come to the team, I think having no trade clauses in there would be pretty cool, and that way you can, like I said, either waive it or not waive it. And then what was this guy's name? Oh man, I just had it up. It was Tank for McEichel on Twitter. So thank you for that suggestion. And I'll let you continue talking about contracts here, as you wanted to talk about different kinds of contracts as well.
Yeah. So just briefly going back to when you mentioned contract extension, I find it would be really beneficial to give a contract halfway through the season for those trades where before the kind of near the trade deadline, or even before the draft for sure, when you're trying to trade a player of yours, but everything looks great, but the team won't take him because his contract's expiring. I feel like giving that contract extension earlier in the season will kind of eliminate that problem. That I know I have that problem. I don't know if many other people have that problem. But Joe, there you are. So yeah, different kinds of contracts. I was really excited about this when we were talking about this. So of course, adding the whole no trade clause or anything. Another fun, interesting thing to add would be contract bonuses. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but for instance, I think it's something like this. But Yager, for example, is getting paid this amount of money, but you can have a bonus where if he gets 20 goals, he gets an extra bonus of so and so. It's I don't know, it's kind of tough in terms of that stuff. I don't know if there was really more on bonuses that you had. I only really had just like if they get a certain amount of points or if they do X amount of things that they get an extra bonus.
I thought you wanted to mention about as their years go deeper into their contract, their salary fluctuates.
Yeah, that was the second thing I was going to get into. I don't know if you just had anything else on bonuses before I moved on quickly.
Not really, just maybe like games played, or if you make a trade with a certain team. That we'll get to that probably next about the conditional picks. But
okay, right on. So another thing would be to kind of spread out how the contract is paid. Kind of the one thing that comes to mind is whole Subban's contract. But for example, I want to sign Jordan Eberle, and what I have is I want to pay him $36 million for 6 years. So in NHL 15, that would mean that for the next 6 years, Jordan Eberle is getting paid $6 million each year. I think it's in NBA or maybe even other games where you can actually change what years they get different amounts so that you can it will help out with your salary cap. So I know in next year I can only afford to give him $4 million, but then after that I can progressively give him more money. So you can work that kind of out so that the first couple of years he gets $4 million, the next couple of years he gets $6 million, then a couple of years after that he gets $8 million or something like that. Just kind of work it out so that it can definitely help kind of play around with your salary for sure. That's something I really want to see in the game.
Yeah, especially if you have certain players that are making a lot more money than you want to be, and your team's not that good. You want to trade them off your team so that way you have more salary cap next year to essentially improve upon his contract. And like I said, even if the player's also getting a lot older, say in like his early 30s or his mid 30s, and he's close to retiring. Maybe that player can take a pay cut, so that way he doesn't want to retire. He still wants to play on the team. He could take a pay cut so that you can give an extension to some other player on your team.
Well, and it would make it easier to dump him for sure. So say you pay him almost all the money up front, and then the last couple of years he's only getting paid $1 or $2 million. It'd be a lot easier to trade him with the $1 million contract instead of having to buy our what's it called? When you take off a chunk of someone's salary when you're trading them.
Retained cap.
Retained, yeah, thank you. Instead of doing that.
Yeah, so I definitely think that would be cool. All right, so now going since we're on the talk of trading, and still with contracts, I like how last year they added the retained cap and the buyout penalties essentially into the game. I thought that was pretty cool. But now as we're seeing a lot more trades happen in the NHL, I think this would be the perfect time to add conditional draft picks into the game. Now, as you guys know, if you watched the trade deadline last year, or you just a huge fan of NHL itself, you see a lot more often now that teams are trading away conditional draft picks rather than just regular draft picks. And if you guys aren't aware of what conditional draft picks are, basically they're the same thing. You could trade away, like, say, a conditional third round pick, which has the possibility of turning into like a second round pick or a first round pick or something along the lines if the player traded for does like a certain task, or that team makes it to a certain round in the playoffs, whether it's like the Western Conference Finals or the Stanley Cup Finals or anything along those lines. So I think that it would be cool in GM mode to add, still be able to trade draft picks, but also give the team that option to make that pick a conditional pick, determined upon, placement in the playoffs, or determining on how many games that player plays, if they're an older player, if they're prone to injury, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Nah, you got it all right there. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay. Like I said, we weren't going to touch on this that much, so let's maybe take like a minute or two just to talk about GM Connected, even though it's not really dependent on this thing. Like we mentioned before, GM Connected, I think it's a good mode. It's a really great idea for a mode, but if they can just fix the simulation aspect of it and like include things that have been put into this year's mode, like the drafting thing, I think that would be a great idea to put into GM Connected for when you want to draft your team rather than just picking like a preset team. I think that'd be cool. You're the more GMO connected guy than I am, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's the only real thing I wanted to talk about was having that whole like the setup for the draft, whether it's if they're able to bring fantasy draft back or even the entry draft, just that whole timed thing and how you could check each player's stats and who picked what and whatever. That'd be real cool. I mean, just from what it sounds like, it's very unlikely that they do bring GM Connected back. But I don't know. Because I was never really affected by the whole. I mean, the one thing that really killed it was how slow it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they put this game out for the same people who whine about how long it takes to open a pack. Like, there's really no patience in terms of people playing this game, it seems. So it's unfortunate that they kind of took it out for that reason. But I mean, yeah, it does suck that you're trying to play GM Connected and you have to wait an extra 2 or 3 minutes to get somewhere. But I mean, yeah, that was the only real thing, was that I just liked how they brought the draft in, and it looked like it was going to be great for setting up for GM Connected if they are able to bring it back. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next thing I have on this list, which I'm surprised they actually took this out of this year's game, was there were no the GM tasks or spending points this year. So, as you guys know, in last year, you could go to, I believe, your GM tracker in NHL 14 or 15 for 360 or whatever, PS3. You could go into your GM tracker, and you had certain tasks that you actually could follow in order to get yourself more spending points to increase, your medical staff, your assistant coach, your scouting, that kind of thing. They took that out of this year. I think it'd be cool if they brought that back a little bit, to get yourself more spending points and actually, have those spending points matter. But instead of having the spending points for, improving certain things, getting it up to level 5 where you really don't know what that does, essentially, I think I talked about this last year too. I think they need to include head coaches, assistant coaches, having yourself the ability to hire a scouting team, that's actually trained in a certain area, whether they're good at scouting Swedish players or Finnish players, not just having the ability to, go to the SHL and just look up all the Swedish players or Finnish players or whatever that kind of deal is. I think it'd be cool if they added that in there. That way in free agency too, you could search for head coaches or scouted players or even a medical staff that way. So if you are playing with injuries on, the player can come back quicker or longer depending on how good your medical staff is.
I'm glad you brought up the whole hiring coaches and stuff, because one thing, the one game mode that I love most out of all NHL games was Dynasty mode. And basically I like that because it was GM mode, except the fact that you could pretty much customize everything. So I remember the one game I played most, that I still actually play to this day on the GameCube, is NHL 05. That was the one with Marcus Naslund on the front. One of the main things I liked about that is that you can change, for instance, the ticket prices, parking prices, concession prices, how much the 50-50 is, and that all correlates into how much money your team's actually making, which will help in terms of hiring a better coach, better assistant coach, yada, yada. Or if you make poor choices, make the ticket prices way too high when your team's doing poorly, that you won't have that much of a budget, et cetera, et cetera. What else did I have here? Did you have anything are you a fan of that kind of thing, or was that just really me? It's more of a business game than NHL, really, in terms of that part.
Yeah, I put that down. I put that down there. Everything you mentioned as well, because like I said, I think what game did that? There was a Madden game that did that. I think a Madden had Dynasty mode. One of those things. I don't know if it was Madden or even NCAA that had it.
Even the recent ones have that kind of same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a good idea, because the GM should not just be in this kind of game. I think we're getting into next generation. We want more to do with with a certain game mode. We want to be, we just want just more things to do, to be honest, to keep ourselves entertained. And I think that is definitely something that could get the normal GM player to keep be entertained, because a regular NHL GM just is not limited to just signing players or making trades or things like that we play into the game. There's so much more additional stuff that goes into it.
Yeah. Another thing on top of the whole customization thing was, I think Madden's the only game that does this, but it would be really interesting, along with this whole budget thing, to have the ability to relocate your team somewhere else. That one's kind of I'm actually maybe not, considering that they're talking about bringing in like Las Vegas and Seattle and stuff, but something that I think would be really, really interesting, especially if they have AHL or even ES or ECHL or something, have your own farm team, is, for example, if you're from somewhere in northern Canada, like up in Yellowknife or something like that, if you wanted to, you can move your ECHL team to Yellowknife, just for the whole idea of, oh, okay, cool, I can put my team wherever, or it kind of brings like a fun thing to it. It won't really affect anything, but just like, oh, cool, my ECHL team is where I grew up or something like that. I feel like just the whole relocation, or even touching up your stadium, making it a bit bigger, making a better stadium, for example. I'm just more of a fan of the whole, like I said, businessy or custom kind of type of game mode. I might be completely off. Like, maybe the whole demographic for GM mode are only those who are strictly into building their team, and that's it. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I would agree, though. It's definitely a viable option, because it happens. I mean, just last year, look at the relocation for the AHL team. I don't know if you know that, but Philly's AHL team, which last year was the Adirondack Phantoms, they moved from Adirondack to Lehigh Valley, and the Calgary Flames AHL team took Adirondack as their new name. So they moved from wherever the hell they were. Where was Calgary's AHL team?
I think they were Abbotsford last year.
They were in Abbotsford. Yes, they were. They were the Abbotsford Heat, and Adirondack Phantoms moved from Adirondack to Lehigh Valley, and the Flames moved from Abbotsford to Adirondack. So they took the name over as Philly took on a new name. So it's definitely it's living proof that kind of stuff happens. So why not put it into the game?
It actually just happened again. Everyone on the Pacific Division, all their AHL teams are now in California.
Really?
They all, like, everyone made the switch over there.
Interesting.
Oh, fun fact for you, sir.
Okay, so let's see. GM task standing points. I have here adding a chemistry stat, like they have in HUT for setting up your lines. Because like I said, last year and this year, I think it was a very good improvement what they did with the line setup. Once again, they always have that thing in the top right corner for your dress skaters, your number of goalies that you have out here. I feel like the menu thing was a little bit more difficult this year, the line setup. Just a tad bit more difficult than last year's, but adding in a chemistry stat like they have in HUT would be cool, whether they are, same nationality, player type as they have in HUT, like playmaker, sniper, two-way forward, that kind of deal. I think that'd be cool if they add something like that in there as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would have that much of an impact on, on the game itself, but, just something cool to build a team with like 99 chemistry or something like that, like you have in HUT.
Maybe if you sim all your games, maybe it might have a better outcome in terms of your players getting more points on that line or doing better on that line, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially if they bring it into penalty kill, for example, and you throw a bunch of snipers on your penalty kill and the chemistry's low, then you're going to have a pretty poor PK.
Yeah, I could see that. Okay, so let's see, just touch on the things that we already went over. Like I said, goalie rotation that needs to be fixed. I think relocation, we already touched on that. Letting rookies play in special events, adding in, like the Olympics, World Juniors, that kind of thing. If you're the GM, you can have the choice if you want to allow these players to go to the special event, giving them bonus experience for progression, but risking the event of an injury happening.
But it's also good for if you're looking at players. It's almost like having that prospect game, but a whole tournament for it. The only problem is that that's all, like, for example, the World Juniors is all double IHF, so I mean they'd have to get the contract for that and everything. But
definitely right.
I think the only thing they can really do in terms of that is I don't know if you know about the whole team Bobby Orr versus team Don Cherry thing.
That's where they like. Is that like the prospects game essentially?
It basically is, yeah. So that's the only thing I can really see them doing. But I mean, obviously having the World Juniors would be way better.
I don't know if I want to see Don Cherry's face on an NHL game, so I don't know if I want to have.
Let's
go. I think that's basically it. The progress report reset that needs to change. I mentioned that last year. It's still screwed up this year, where you're in the middle of the following season. The progress report, like. Stats are still in there, like it says, so and so increased 12 points, but you're already halfway through the previous or the next season when he's already had his 12 points reset. That needs to be reset. Either that or have like the ability to choose like a certain time period of when you could actually see the person's progress or his stats change, whether it's either like on a monthly basis or like a time period, whether free agency to beginning of the season or beginning of the season to All-Star break or something like that, trade deadline to the end of the season, something like that. But they need to reset the changes because it's really hard to determine if a person's actually increasing in his stats or if he's decreasing in his stats throughout the year.
Something else I want to talk about. I'm not sure if I should bring this up now or if I should bring this up in a future video we do, but World Cup of Hockey. Like, would it be... Like, should we talk about this now, or should we talk about this?
I think that's kind of along the lines of what letting the rookies play in special events. You know, if they get the rights to do something like that every 4 years?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Every 4 years in your GM mode, just in allowing certain players to... does it happen during the regular season?
I think it's kind of like the Olympics, where they won't have the All-Star break, but they'll have that.
Yeah, well... Essentially, you could take players off of your either AHL team or off your NHL team and let them go play in that special event, like it said, and earn bonus experience, but risking injury and stuff like that.
Yeah. I just feel like it would be a really cool thing to have, especially in BOJoeKO, which I'll talk about this eventually, but like playing for that. But even if you have the ability to, during the World Cup of Hockey, if you were a legendary GM, or even if they just allow you in the game to actually GM
that team.
One of the teams, yeah, whether you want to GM
that'd be pretty cool.
Under 20, what is it, under 21 team? 20?
I think so. Under 20, under 20, under 21 team, yeah.
Or if you want to GM or coach, the Europe team or something like that. I feel like that. I'm sure that's something that I can talk more about in BOJoeKO.
Let's see. So team strategies. I mentioned this last year. I don't even think they have it in the game this year. Like I said, that's mainly for... I don't think it has an effect on simulation, but it's more just like setting up your computers for like power plays, penalty kills, the strategies in and of itself. It's more something for in-game actual gameplay, but I think that would be pretty cool if that actually had an effect on the simulation itself. And now this last thing I wanted to talk about here is something that got me a lot of shit last year, but I'm going to bring it up again. But this time a little bit more leeway. I got a lot of crap last year because I said that they should take the play the game option out of GM mode because, in my personal opinion, GM mode should be a simulation only type game mode. A lot of people, surprisingly to me, a lot of people actually do use the play game option in GM mode, surprisingly, because they put up a fair argument where, yeah, you could do the same thing in HUT, but those people aren't, wealthy like certain others are in HUT, so they can't afford the best players. So what do? They build basically their HUT team in GM mode, and then they could play games against the computer using those special players. Or, they developed a random prospect in like one of the later years, and they actually want to see how he plays in the game itself. So, fair enough. But just for my option, I think it would be cool if they gave the user the option, like an on or an off switch, whether to have the play game option in or not in their a certain file of the GM mode.
Yeah, that goes with the whole like demographic of who's playing. Like for example, I prefer the old business type. Other people prefer the whole build your dream team and play with it type. You, for example, are more of a fan of. Well, I guess we're kind of both on the whole business side of it, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anything
So
else?
I get both sides of the argument.
Anything else? Because I think I ran through everything.
I just had more little things in terms of like major things like the whole contract and stuff. I think we touched on everything I had as well. I just had other things like the ability to retire player numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have someone who is a franchise player, the ability to retire it, that's just something cool. Ability to choose who your major sponsors are and what companies are on the boards. That's nothing real major, but especially if they can't get the copyright.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, like Scotiabank, who has
just like arena customization, basically.
Yeah, instead of Scotiabank, have like Scotty Financial or something like. Even if they're just fake names or something like that. But other than that, yeah, I think we're all caught up on, especially what I had.
All right, cool. So basically, if we wanted to wrap this up in just kind of like a big old whole package here, basically what we liked most about GM mode this year was the scouting. Definitely was a very huge improvement. The overall presentation, it takes a little bit of time to get used to it, but it's definitely a much prettier looking mode. The drafting update that they made halfway through the year is really cool. It gets the user more interactive with the drafting system, and it's also a possible stepping stone for future modes, whether it be GM Connected or anything else, or Dynasty mode or something like that, if they want to implement into the game. And just the stats, basically, of finally including all the player stats for their entire user's career. Dislikes that we didn't like, basically the in-game simulation, that fact being out of there where you can't simulate each period. I think that was definitely a major turning point. No AHL teamer stats, for those hardcore players that actually like to, have an AHL team, see how their prospects are doing. And I guess the potential system too as well. Like I said, it could be some people are for it, some people against it. I'm one of those guys that was against it. I didn't like it. I would rather go back to the good old 1 through 5 stars, green, yellow, red type of deal, rather the high, medium, or low potential. And basically, as you guys saw, I'm not going to go over all our wish list things, but it's just a lot of cool stuff. Just going into deep detail of Richard's suggestions for like a whole entire like dynasty mode, as well as all of the different types of contract financials type of deal, whether they're different types of contracts, player interactions with them, to basically my stuff for stats for drafting prospects, the conditional picks for trading, GM task, whether you're like hiring head coaches or staffs or medical staffs, and then just just the nitpicking stuff here and there. But other than that, I think that was a pretty good first video that we made for our GMO wish list. So if you guys liked any of our suggestions, or you have your own suggestions that you guys would like to see for GM mode as well, leave in the comments as well. And I think next up, the next video we're gonna make, what do you think we should touch on? You want to go to BOJoeKO next?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so the next video that we'll do is BOJoeKO, which was definitely a very disappointing mode next year. So once again, leave your suggestions for the things that if you guys either agreed with us or disagreed with us on some of our GM mode wish list ideas, or the things that we liked or disagreed with it. Make sure to leave that in the comments. Also, leave in your suggestions for things that you guys would either liked, disliked, or would like to see NHL 16 for BOJoeKO/Live the Life. I'll put them both in there depending on whatever they're going to make for next year. Other than that, I think that was a pretty good video. So thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to leave a like on this video, as well as subscribe to my channel, as well as Richard's Head's channel, because he makes the funny video from time to time. They're all right, I guess, but definitely
I made a video.
He made a video, so make sure to go check him out. His link is always on my channel. I'll put it into the description for this video as well. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys leave some good support on this video. And like we said, next time we'll be making our BOJoeKO wish list / Live the Life wish list for NHL 16 next time. So thanks for watching, guys.
Love you.
Richard Head loves you. So thanks for watching.